Fuck.
Okay, so the famous no, we're gonna keep going. The famous Mercury retrograde is what most people think of when they think of retrogradation. I just made up that word, I think. Retrogradation. So retrograde is when a planet appears to be moving backwards in its journey traversing through the sky. However, it is an illusion that it's not literally moving backwards. It just appears that way for a set period of time. Certain planets go retrograde more frequently than others, Mercury being the most frequent. So that's why it gets the most press. But yeah, we're going to just talk about how we treat retrograde periods and understand that you have to treat it holistically. Um, so you can't just make super broad generalized statements, but we'll talk about how we work with retrogradation and then also what it means if you have retrograde planets natally, meaning you were born with planets retrograding your chart. So Mario, do you have planets retrograde first?
Just Jupiter is the only retrograde in my chart.
Jupiter.
Which sounds pretty terrible because Jupiter is extremes. So then we'll be more endemic to more extremes perhaps when we're older. I mean, I'm just looking at it from the Virgo negative scope for a minute, you know.
Very qualifying. Interesting. I have Jupiter retrograde as well. And what you touched on, though, being kind of enhancing the energy is kind of what I got from that. You're saying it'll make it more, it'll emphasize that energy. That is a Vedic belief system that when planets are retrograde, there's more karma attached to those planets, if you will. And it can emphasize that energy. But I would say that it tends to basically turn that energy inward. So whatever that energy is, it's going to have a more inward scope to it. So with Jupiter is expansion, but when it's retrograde, there's more of like an inner expansion. It's not so much about expanding out into the material. It might be more of a contemplative, like expanding the mind, expanding the ideas, the beliefs in a more internal way.
And that's nice for us because we're both, you know, going down the path of wisdom, of knowledge. So that'll be a nice adjunct, you know, to who we are and our. I mean, elders are only created, you know, because they've been doing this type of work for decades and decades. You know what I mean? Like there's experience and then the study which brings one to that possible place or space.
How do you, at least when you're paying attention to Mars or Mercury going retrograde, how do you work with that? Or what does that signal to you, if anything?
I have to stop being lazy and I have to complete all the things that I didn't complete. So for me, like I pay a lot of attention because I'm a Virgo. So as a Virgo, I just feel I get busier. I really feel I get busier, and anything I didn't do correctly or didn't complete correctly, the prefix, the RE prefix comes up, you know. Reflect, redo, reassess, all that really comes up. Refine, right? And so usually I get really busy on retrograde, and I kind of hunker down, and I'm not as social because I know, like, okay, now I got to get stuff done, and so I kind of hide myself a bit so I can get everything.
Retreat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like those are great activities. I was born with Mercury retrograde natally. So for those who share that placement, it's the mind, Mercury. And when you have it retrograde, and it's also our learning processes, how we communicate. When you have it retrograde, it brings it more into a different kind of processing, how you process information into a more internalized way. And so it can make traditional, I think, schooling or traditional, more linear ways of learning more challenging, at least as a child, until you kind of learn to work with that energy and to know that there is a more internalized process for integrating information, learning.
Was it the same for you? Was it the same in terms of challenge for college as well?
I would say yes. Yeah, I would say yeah. I mean, I think school in general is a very kind of linear teaching style. So I would suggest for people who have kids with Mercury retrograde that there might be alternative learning ways, maybe more hands-on, maybe more experiential learning styles that could be more fruitful for the kid. But it's not to say, you're going to be a remedial, in your learning. Did fine. I had fine grades. But I would just say, knowing that certain subjects that definitely came out, like math, was more challenging for me. Again, you want to look at what is the element of Mercury, how is Mercury positioned in the chart, is it exalted, is it in detriment? Those are all factors. You can't just slap, oh, well, it's retrograde into a bucket. But yeah, I would say that there's definitely a more internalized thing that goes on. And so when Mercury is retrograde as a transit, depending also on how your Mercury is in your natal chart, it might affect you differently. So the kind of cliche or generalization is that Mercury retrograde isn't necessarily the best time to do things that need to be done in a very linear way. So that has come to include things that include like business transactions, making or commencing something very important, a start date for something. That it might shorten that or create some sort of delays within what was begun. And I know within the magic communities, or when people do I guess different forms of ritual, there are some belief systems that say it's not the best to conduct those kinds of things while Mercury is retrograde. It's better to wait until it goes direct.
I like to think about it in terms of like a shadow come forth over the sun of the activities of the day. So it's more like a shadow time, as we both know, as you guys probably know, a withdrawal time. And so when a planet appears to be moving in another direction, that's symbolic of that the planet's retreating, withdrawing, going into the cave, going into a space of hibernation before it's ready to come out again. That's one way to look at it. A lot of people, and this is related to Uranus in a way, but a lot of people talk about, I mean, it's almost a cultural meme now at this point, right? Where people say, whenever the computers are not working right, or emails are not getting where they need to go, or the computer breaks down, or electrical issues, people say, oh, is it Mercury retrograde? So what do you think that means in relationship to when it is Mercury retrograde? How do we handle when all those communications do start being affected? And how do you think they're affected? Do you think it's just because it's Mercury? It's the symbol of communication, so it's like not
It's the
able to
messenger.
communicate.
Yeah,
The
I
messenger,
mean,
right?
Mercury is a messenger planet. The god Hermes is associated with Mercury, the Hermetic arts, which kind of circles back to what I said about ritual being maybe not the best time. Or you could argue maybe when it's retrograde, that is a good time. I mean, it's all relative,
Yeah,
right? For me, I've personally experienced more technical hangups with retrograde periods, but it's hard to say, I haven't objectively measured that against non-Mercury retrograde periods, but I've definitely noticed like more snafus or more major snafus. I remember there was one, it might have been Instagram. It went down for a while. That was over at Mercury retrograde. And that's kind of bizarre for a platform that big to just not work for like a day, or it was like a few hours. And I remember that happened during Mercury retrograde. So I think, and think about what happened in Austin, Texas. We're just getting out of the retrograde in a few hours here, but there was a whole power outage.
yeah, right.
So that was another Mercury retrograde period. So I would say, yes, I have observed that personally. I've noticed that.
How does it affect you when you see people who have it? And you touched on this already, but I'd like to hear it again because it was a very unique perspective you had about that. How do you think people born with Mercury in retrograde, like yourself, how do you think they deal with the contrast? Like, how do you feel like you speak clear, like you're able to get more things across the bridge of communication on retrograde, or when it's direct, when Mercury is direct?
I think retrograde is a time for me to go more internal with my process, or write, or like you were saying, maybe fine tune ideas that I have, or have some even revelatory moments of ideas that come through. And then when Mercury is direct, I can maybe implement that into a plan of action. But the retrograde is definitely more of a reflection period, more of a period to get clear with maybe where my headspace is or things I want to develop for when then I feel like when Mercury is direct, taking action.
Sounds good.
The other thing I want to bring up about retrograde planets, so Mars can obviously go retrograde.
Yeah.
The only planet, well, the only astrological phenomena that don't retrograde would be the nodes are always retrograde, the nodes of the moon, and the sun does not retrograde, and the moon does not
Yeah, the
retrograde.
luminaries do not, and neither do the nodes, right?
So it's just something to keep in mind. And
If you put the nodes on top of each other, if you put the south node underneath the north node,
mm-hmm.
and you link them with that little horseshoe kind of circle link, then you have a circle, and you could look at it like that's the circle of life.
The Ouroboros.
And how we begin the journey on our south node, right? And then we go down around the circle, and then right about the seventh house, if we were looking at it like a horoscope, then the second part of our life, we really truly enter into our north node experiences. So you could kind of make a circle out of it and say that the nodes are in itself the journey of life, or guide the journey of life, even though they're descending. It's the same argument relative to where we're like, because we're beginning at the south node, we're beginning where we left off. I don't know if that makes too much sense, but it's just a metaphor you can carry forth.
Yeah, I feel like that can tie into the retrograde topic, where I think of a planet retrograde as it's like you're going to a destination. Say I have to go to the market, and I have like something I need to buy, and I'm gonna get in my car, go, but then I'm on my way and I'm like, shoot, I left my wallet at home. It's almost like this like circling back perhaps of that planetary energy. Does it mean I'm not going to go to the market eventually? No, I am. But there's this kind of maybe U-turn thing that is happening, where maybe that is why there's more karma attached, and that kind of speaks to why that energy might be emphasized. There's more of a maybe journey with that planetary energy.
Fascinating. That's fascinating we bring this up, because the more I think about that and the more I take myself in tune with the day, like sometimes that'll happen to me, like I'll be off somewhere and then, oh, I forgot my list, or oh, I forgot this at home. And instead of getting frustrated about it, that I have to go back home, I have to grab this thing, I take it like that's part of the journey.
Part of the lesson.
Yeah, that I have to go back home, because then I'm going to leave at the right time and meet the people, and connect with who I'm supposed to connect with at the right time. And I've watched this occur, and it's fascinating, because it'll just be like I'll start to leave, or maybe I'll leave and then, oh no, I have to do it again. I got to go back and leave again, and then it'll be right time and then right flow. It's fascinating to observe. And you know what I mean? Instead of getting really frustrated about it and saying, oh my God, I can't never leave my house because I'm always forgetting shit. You know?
Yeah, and it takes some of the like negativity, I guess, associated. Like I even tell people Mercury retrograde isn't a negative doomy thing necessarily. It's just we happen to live in such a linear oriented paradigm that people just kind of think that, oh, well, business as usual isn't going on. But like you just mentioned, there's gifts in that. There's gifts in that refinement process, or that process of having to do something a little roundabout. Like you were saying, you never know who you'll encounter. And that's a beautiful metaphor for, I think, what retrograde planets represent and what their periods represent. Because someone might find a Mars retrograde period frustrating. Oh, I want to like go do this, but I'm being stifled, or my efforts are, being foiled. But
oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
And just part of what you're saying, last year's July to December, the Mars Aries retrograde last year, right? Mars going back and forth,
In
and
2020.
yeah, in 2020 last year. Like, I don't know if you guys felt it, but it was super frustrating. And for me, like with my moon in Aries, it was like there was times where I was just volatile. I just felt so the emotional energies couldn't be controlled. I mean, being Aries, getting that so sensitively with Mars conjunct. And it was a very frustrating time because Aries wants to start something new, really brashly, really boldly.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, like it has to go retrograde. Oh, wait a second, I fucked up. Let me try it again. And if you think about your lives during those last 6 months, like there was a lot of, I mean, even in our lives, we can reflect on it. There was so many start and stops where we couldn't get things like going, get things on the road. Once we get some on the road, then there's a breakdown, and then it goes forward again, and then another breakdown.
Yeah, because I tried. I feel like I defied my own astrological wisdom with that in terms of initiating things during that period where I would have been wiser to wait. But was it a waste because I had these experiences?
No, it was right because even in your solar return, we saw that. You know what I mean? We saw that you were going to have like kind of these starts and stops and different visitations and different things.
Yeah.
And so it was a part of what you were needing to experience. Even though at some point it seems frustrating, or multiple points it seems super frustrating.
Necessary.
It's necessary. It's just I've been really sitting with that and kind of experiencing the nuance of it, that I can't just take for granted something so mundane as I'm going to walk outside to my car right now. That's not mundane. I'm in the irreality of whatever that moment might bring.
Yeah, you never know. What
I don't know.
Yeah.
I might know how to interpret it, from looking at a chart of the day, but once I get out there, how is it going to come forth? Like there's no mundane moment. All our experience is like suspect of something bold to come out and impact our life.
Well
I don't know why
put.
I'm getting so philosophical right now.
Well, we're still in the retrograde, so we're
Nothing else
ruminating
to do,
over.
ruminate over it.
Yeah, ruminate, wax philosophical.
Yeah.
If you guys have any questions related to this topic, or if you have a chart you want us to more holistically look at, like a more personal question, we both are available for those types of consultations. And write to us if you have topics you would love addressed or you want to be a guest.
All right, sounds good. Hope you guys enjoyed.